Hey there, welcome to Synth Seeker. Today we're going to look at how to stack synths and the sort of sounds you can achieve for your Berlin School or ambient or space music by doing so. Actually, stacking works with everything. It came into widespread use when MIDI was created. I'll cover stacking with several different types of synths, both hardware and software, but present the information so that it's applicable to your synth setup as much as my own. It doesn't really matter what synths you own. If they all speak MIDI or can convert MIDI to CV, you should get something useful from this video. If you have questions, be sure to say so in the comments. Finally, hit the like button if this is useful for you, and if you want me to keep making more. Let's get started. So what do I mean when I say stacked synths? Well, stacking or layering synths is useful for many things in music production. At its core, patch creation is stacking oscillators and stacking modulation to get your interesting sounds. We'll do a simple version of that here, and then we'll stack the patches we make to create larger aggregate sounds that inspire us. Okay, so here's our first stacking example. This is stacking, going to be stacking this subsequent 37 here with this Cobalt 8M, right? And we may spin in some of the Nord A1, but really we're going to use two synths as the example. It's going to be subsequent laid over Cobalt, all right? And what we're looking at here is, if I turn off all the effects here, let's see, we don't need that, we don't need that, and we don't need that. All right, this is your patch. All right, so that's just a step sequence. So what are we looking at here? It's nothing fancy as far as patches go. All right, this is a square wave and a bit of a pulse wave laid on top of each other, 24 dB low pass filter. It's not really impressive, but as we saw in the previous videos, you add a little grand orbiter there. We'll give it a little delay. And then finally, a little reverb. Right, and that's your basic Berlin sound, link in the corner, right? We talked about this in a previous video. It's not the only way to do it, but it's an easy way, it's a lot of fun, and it sounds good, all right? So let's pick a nice analog sound, put some delay on it, and a little reverb, and some kind of modulation, either modulate the filter, maybe a little of that. I've got a grand orbiter running on here, which is a phaser. So that's that. Okay, let's take that down. Let's go over to the Cobalt. So bring this back up. All right, the Cobalt is doing this. Let's turn those effects off. It's nothing fancy. Again, it's just a sawtooth with a little low pass filter. Running a sequence, right? We've got some delay on it. Now this sequence is actually only 7 steps long. Okay, so we've got an even step sequence, an even count step sequence on the subsequent, and an odd count one on this Cobalt. And when you lay them on top of each other, you're going to get note phasing. Okay, so pattern phasing. And again, link in the corner for that one. A little delay, we add some big reverb on that. All right, and when we bring them both in together, so the point of this is we've got the Cobalt is listening on the same MIDI channel. It's on MIDI channel 6 actually right now to match what the subsequent is. We made both of these synths listen to the same MIDI channel, okay? So they're both going to respond to note presses. And when we look down here, they're both on channel 6. And when we start playing, So that is a combination of the two layers. And it's a lot of fun. So that is a just classic example of stacking, right? You don't have to have, humongous synths that do a million things. You can do a lot with synths that are relatively simple, right? Cobalt 8's not going to break the bank. In a minute, we'll do an example with some other 32s, right? So that's one example of stacking. You set a sequence running on one synth, set a harmonically related, but rhythmically perhaps different sequence running on another synth. You make both of those synths listen to the same MIDI channel. They're both on channel 6 right now. And then when you transmit, you're going to get something nice. The point is to make something. I'm only pressing one button and getting a ton of motion on this, right? So the point is to build yourself a nice little stack that gives you some sort of creative juice that gets flowing, and then you just work through running through some basically roots for chords, and then build a little progression out of that, because you can sequence this stuff, right? So, go nuts. I'm in my James Horner space phase. I see the Enterprise front flying all over the place with trippy colors. All right, so that's example one. So, take a just synth, have it listen on a MIDI channel, in this case 6, have another synth, have it listen on the same MIDI channel, 6, even though I know it says 7, but it's 6 for this demonstration. Then give them either step sequences or arpeggiation, and give them different rhythms or different lengths of that sequence. And then when you layer those, you're going to get interesting things going on. So let's look at another way to do this. Okay, we're back. Now let's look at some modular, or rather semi-modular stuff. I've got a Deluge here. I've got some CV clock coming out of it. I'm malting it with the bare malt super sketch up into 2 Mother 32s. Okay, these are not crazy complex synths. They're very basic sounds, good timbres. You get some nice things out of it, but not ornate. And so if we start this rolling, there we go. Dirty potentiometer, but just a basic 8-step bass line with some rests in there, right? We're not going to do Berlin School. We're going to actually do Dusseldorf School. Let's do a little craft work. Add a little delay. Bring in some reverb. And then we'll bring in this top pattern is a 13-step pattern, playing the high end. Right, and then on the Deluge, we can transpose it. So our CV from the Deluge is coming in, getting malted out to our synths. Right? It's that simple. Remember, if we take this apart, that's all it is. All right, so stacking. I'm going to stack these two lines together, control them with the same CV that's just malted out with the clock, and really that's about it. that's it, right? So again, stacking, right? Two little synths with their own little step sequencers, having harmonically similar patterns, a little bit different rhythmic patterns, layer them on top of each other. You end up stacking those together, and then using a single control, in this case a single CV for pitch, running in and getting multed out to transpose both of them. And it works out really well. It's super fun. And that is just, a creative tool you can use. I lose a lot of time to just jamming, moving through roots of chords, basically, and end up recording that because you can sequence it just like before and build out your pieces. All right, let's look at one more example. Okay, here we are again. We are in the box. Okay, so we're going to use we're going to use Ableton here. This is my sort of go-to DAW, but it doesn't matter. Anything that manipulates MIDI and can route it and duplicate it. You could do this in Logic or Renoise or Reason or Bitwig, whatever you want. Okay, it's just a matter of routing MIDI. Okay, so here's the Ableton example. It will work in just about anything. I've got a MIDI track here, and Ableton has a device called an instrument rack. Okay, it allows you to set up parallel processing chains. So I drag an instrument rack into my track, and when you open up this panel here, you see your chains. Okay, it will eventually, let me show you what it looks like empty. Drag in an instrument rack and you get something like this. Okay, if you drag an instrument into it, a plug-in, a VST, something like that, it will appear and you can open up the audio chains. That's what this is. Every instrument in here is a new sort of audio chain that runs in parallel. If I drag in another instrument, it becomes a second audio chain. If I drag in a third, we get a third. And the way this works is any MIDI data that gets sent into the system here from a clip or from playing gets routed in parallel to all of these. So these are effectively layers in a stack. They'll all get the same input and then generate output that gets summed at the end and sent out. It's a super useful metaphor. I'm sure there are analogs of that in just about every piece of software. So let me delete that. I've got one set up here. And let's look at what I've got in this sort of set of layers in this stack. I've got 3 layers. All right. The first one we'll start with here. There's a bunch of utility stuff in here which you may or may not use, or whatever the analog is in your software. But I've got some pitch control. I've got a little MIDI monitor so we can see when notes come in. I've got a simple step recorder. This is something I built for Max for Live. It's available free, a link in the corner. I did a video on this. I'm using that to sort of build up each element, every stack in my layer. I'm constraining everything to the Dorian Sharp 4 scale, which sounds a little weird, but that's fine. I'm just having fun with it. Everything then runs into a wavetable, and there is some chorus and delay on the end. Okay, so that's my first layer. And it sounds like this when I go to play a note. So that's that layer. So let me mute that back. Let's talk about our second layer here. So the second layer in our stack is very similar. Again, monitor, step recorder, pitch control, synthesizer, delay. All right. But my step recorder has a different pattern in it. Let's hear what this one sounds like. So you have to imagine we're going to layer that on top of the previous one. And then finally we have this third stack. The vehicle's driving by the home. It's a nice tone. It's a beautiful tone. Background of this video. All right. And then our third stack is this bass line. Again, same basic layout. Pitch control, MIDI monitor, step recorder for the bass line. Constraining it to a scale. Instrument, a little delay. And it sounds like this. All of these share the same thing. They're using a step recorder to take the input of a single note and turn it into an interesting pattern. Okay, and using some delay and a little reverb sometimes to get that sort of Berlin sort of wash feel to it. Now, when we turn all of these on and basically play a single note, we're going to get this really thick stack of motion and harmony. Here we go. And that's it, right? It's just yet another way to do a stack. Stacks are effectively take a piece of MIDI, split it out, replicate it out to multiple synths, have those synths do something harmonically related, but a little, some small changes in between for some interesting texture, have them do either the same or something different, variant on rhythm, and then have their timbres shifting. And that gives you what is effectively a really thick stack with very little input. And it's something to play with. It's just a creative device that you can use in your setup as you go. And that's about it for being in the box. Let me know in the comments how you do it. Okay, and our final example here is we're going to look at this A1. If you've watched any of my videos, you know this is one of my favorite synths. It's basically 4 synths in one. So what we're going to stack are the 4 layers of this synth. Now, there's a lot of synths that can do this. So basically all the Nord synths do this. The Blofeld, the Novation Summit, the Waldorf Iridium, the Moog 1, a lot of synths that are basically multi-timbral. The old Roland D series, almost all of those except the D50. And basically what I'm going to do here, what you can do is the stack is that you set each layer to a different pad or arpeggiation. And so let me show you what we've got here. Let me play for you what we've got here. Here's the first layer. Turn off all the effects here. And take the drums out. Right? And this is really just a chord progression that I've got sequenced here. Right? Nothing special. Alright. And again, it's not a crazy synth patch. I haven't put hours into building this timbre, this patch out. It's just a plain old sawtooth, almost like a tuba, doing its thing. And then if we apply a little delay, or rather a flange and some delay, right, and maybe a little reverb. Right. So that's running. That's our first stack. And then we've also got a basic pad. This is a synced pad. So basically it's 2 oscillators, and the second oscillator is being synced to the first one, and we're sweeping or the other way around. The first one's being synced to the second one, and we're sweeping the frequency of the second oscillator. Again, running through that big spacey reverb. And then our third stack, third layer in the stack is another arpeggiated one. Different rhythmic pattern, right? This is crossing 3 octaves. And this is a pulse wave, right? Square wave that's been tweaked a bit. And then our final one is just an airy pad, like a pan flute. And when you stack all those layers, you get through. Right. So that's sort of yet another form of stacking you can do. It doesn't have to be necessarily step sequences and monophonic lines. You can do full arpeggiation stacks. This gets real thick real fast, so do be careful with what you do, and you know, be careful what you're doing in your frequency bands. It's easy to get a lot of buildup in certain areas, and then you get things that sound quacky, or low ends that get real muddy. But really, that's it. So that's another example there. So let's put this toys away, and we'll go back to a little discussion about what's going on here. And so with that, we are about done for today, I think. Go try some of this yourself, and be sure to let me know where I can listen to what you make. There's a link in the description to a great video by Synthmania where he demos numerous classic 80s synth stacks. Check it out if that's something you're into. Hello, Synthwave. Questions and whatnot are welcome in the comments, and again, please like this video if you want me to make more. Be kind to strangers, and as always, you have been watching Synth Seeker. Have a great weekend.